Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Littlefield. I'm an assistant professor in the athletic training, kinesiology, and biomechanics departments. And I have the pleasure of welcoming our wonderful panelist members today. My connection to this panel is with our Emerging Leaders Academy students, as well as our graduate AT students. We've been talking a lot about the dignity of the human person and every human person. And some of these panelist members, as well as myself, have had really good conversations about people with various abilities and people who need our care within healthcare. And so I'm really honored to present this panel with you today. So starting off with Dr. Heather Lundeen, she's an associate professor of the physical therapy program here at Mary. She earned her DPT in 2005 from the University of North Dakota and her EDD from the University of Mary in 22. She is a board-certified clinical specialist in pediatric physical therapy. She began teaching in 2008 here at Mary and has an extensive pediatric physical therapy clinical background. Through her teaching, she is able to share her passion for physical therapy, children of all abilities, and their families. Heather is able to share her passion with her husband, Chris, and their 3 children, Connor, Olivia, and Chloe. In her free time, she enjoys volunteering, running, reading, outdoor activities, and being a spectator at her children's activities. Next, we have Roxane Romanick. While Roxane has worked for a majority of her social work career in the field of developmental disabilities and special education supporting children and their family with disabilities, her true education began over 23 years ago when she became a mom to her daughter who lives with Down syndrome. She worked in North Dakota's early intervention system as a parent mentor and consultant for the state of Part C coordinator for 15 years. She served as the state's integrating coordinating council as a member, chair, and then staff. In both her personal and professional capacities, Roxane has had extensive experience with direct patient support, program and policy development, advisory involvement, and advocacy at the local, state, and federal level. Roxane is currently on the DEC Family Committee and works as the Executive Director for North Dakota's Down Syndrome Association Designer Genes of North Dakota. Roxane has been the Executive Director for Designer Genes of North Dakota, which is a nonprofit that supports individuals with Down syndrome, their families, and professionals that support them for the past 7 years. Prior to that, she served as the board president since 2010. She has a master's degree in social work from the University of North Dakota and is licensed as a licensed certified social worker here in the state. And last but not least, we have Donna Wanzek. Donna and her late husband, Marvin, were presented with the opportunity to open their home to their daughter, Gail, over 50 years ago. They were foster parents at the time, as well as parents to a large biological family. They were challenged by a local family priest to open their arms wider. Donna will be sharing her story on that decision today. So please help me give a warm welcome to all of our panelists.
Good morning once again, and welcome. Let's see if we can advance the slides here. There we go. We are really pleased to have you all with us today. Our purpose for presenting this convocation today is to challenge each of you to think differently about including individuals with disabilities in all aspects of community life, but especially school, work, faith, social activities, and family. By simply being present today, listening with a curious mind and an open heart, you have made the first step in being an advocate for inclusion practices for individuals with disabilities. This topic is clearly relevant and important for all of us at the University of Mary, whether faculty, staff, students, or friends. The university values this subject as noted in its statement on the dignity of the human person, which reads, as a Christian, Catholic, and Benedictine community, the University of Mary is wholly committed to upholding and defending the dignity of every human person as created in the image and likeness of God. Pope St. John Paul said, in an ordered and productive community, it is a fundamental principle that every human being is a person, having rights and duties flowing directly and spontaneously from one's very nature. These rights are therefore universal, inviolable, and inalienable. As we move forward this morning, considering this topic, I wanted to start by attempting to provide some background definitions so that we can all move oriented in a similar direction, listening with the ear of our heart and less distractions. Our topic today is applicable to all people with disabilities. Our focus and our stories will center more on individuals with intellectual disabilities. However, the takeaways are certainly generalizable to individuals with all disabilities. So our first definition, intellectual disability is defined as a condition characterized by a significant limitation in both intellectual functioning and adaptive behavior that originates before the age of 22. But I want to call your attention to the rest of the definition. Assessments to determine if an individual has intellectual disability must also assume that limitations in intellectual capacity often coexist with strengths in a person, and that an individual's level of life functioning will improve if appropriate personalized supports are provided over a sustained period. The other definition I want to cover is disability inclusion. This is defined as including people with disabilities in everyday activities and encouraging them to have roles similar to their peers who do not have a disability. This involves more than simply encouraging people. It requires making sure that adequate policies and practices are in effect in a community or organization. Inclusion should lead to increased participation in socially expected life roles and activities such as being a student, worker, friend, community member, patient, spouse, or parent. And finally, I wanted to offer some education for all of us on language when referring to individuals with disabilities. There are two different ways, and both are considered acceptable. The first is person-first language, which emphasizes the person before the disability. For example, a person who is blind or people with spinal cord injuries. The other method is identity-first language, which puts the disability first in the description, such as a disabled person or an autistic person. Person-first or identity-first language is equally appropriate depending on personal preference. And when in doubt, ask the person which they prefer. As I finish up the background, I wanted to point out that the University of Mary's mission, vision, and Benedictine values clearly support valuing all individuals regardless of ability. Our statement on inclusion reads, among the 6 Benedictine values of the University of Mary is hospitality. In chapter 53 of the Rule of St. Benedict, we read these words, all guests who present themselves are to be received as Christ, for he is going to say, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. Furthermore, as the preface for the university's accessibility services on the webpage, it's written, an unshakable dignity of every human person innately pours forth from the fundamental truth that all persons are made in the image and likeness of God. A Catholic university has a particular responsibility to uphold the dignity of all those with disabilities who are invisibly ostracized and made to feel less dignified because of their disability. In imitation of Jesus, who dedicated much of his ministry to the disabled and the poor, we should give preferential care to those in our community with special needs. And now I'd like to turn it over to Roxane Romanick, who not only is an amazing woman, but she's also my aunt.
Good morning, and thanks for making the decision to be here. As Heather got us focused this morning, I'd like you to think of a person that you might know that identifies as having a disability. and maybe hold them in your heart during this presentation. But I want to ask you a few questions and challenge you a little bit to think critically about that person that maybe just popped into your head. How many of you have a person in your head right now? Just show of hands. Could be yourself, maybe even, right? What defines the disability for the person that you have in your mind? Do they self-identify as having a disability? They're loud and proud about it. Is the disability visible? So it's easy to recognize, easy to know. Obviously, I get to hang out with a lot of people who have Down syndrome, and typically that's something that somebody can see about them, right? Or is it the impact of the substantial functional skills that's noticeable? So, you think about people who are aging, right? Myself even, I don't walk as spryly as I did when I was 40. So is it affecting my function? Do I identify as having a disability? All those things I think are important to think about. But then one step further, I want to take you today. Where does this person live? What do they do during the time they're awake? Are they at school? Are they at work? Do they volunteer? Where are they? And then what supports do they have? How do these supports come about? How do they happen? How do they access them? So keeping those thoughts in mind, because I want you to have that person in your head, we're going to leap ahead and I'm going to take you through a little bit of a journey. But I'm going to, of course, wrong way. Of course, tell you who's in my head, and she's in the room. So she may have been your chosen person. Elizabeth Romanick's here with us today. She's my daughter and Heather's cousin, and Heather's her godmother. This is my why. She has given me the opportunity, as you heard in my bio, to have both professional and personal lived experience that I bring into my work. I'm so lucky. I feel so lucky and blessed to have those opportunities to, advise me in everything I do every day. We learned about your diagnosis before she was born. And it really, truly helped us to be ready, all the way down to knowing how we wanted to talk about Down syndrome, how we wanted to tell people about it. We wanted people to know. We didn't want it to be an elephant sitting in the middle of the room and people tripping about it. And most certainly, we didn't want anybody really saying we're sorry, because we were moving forward in the world, right, Liz? Mm-hmm. And so life went on. It's led me to so many interactions with so many others who have diagnoses that all need additional accommodations and supports. And it led us to create the nonprofit that we have. One of my goals in doing the work with Designer Genes was to making sure that we were supporting new diagnoses. And now many of them are happening prenatally and also still at birth, but wanting to make sure that those families had everything that they could possibly want at the time that they get that diagnosis. And so that's one of the reasons that our nonprofit Designer Genes exists. And also at this point, we're extremely busy at the state capitol having conversations about the needed supports that people with disabilities need. Let's see if I can get this going in the right direction. This is a picture of the our state school, as most people know it, in Grafton, North Dakota. So I was in high school in 1975 when the Education of All Handicapped Children Act was signed into law. I was actually working in special education for Lake Region Special Ed in Devils Lake, North Dakota, as a school social worker. And 6 years, and actually that was only 6 years later when the Education for All Handicapped Children Act was passed. So 1981 was when I was started. And I have to admit, I was completely oblivious to the changes that were happening in North Dakota and then also across our country, which I'll talk about a little bit later. 18 years later, I was holding my daughter on the morning of April 7th. So yes, it's almost her birthday if you want to wish her that on the way out. And I was completely overwhelmed with gratitude that no one would come into our hospital room to explain that the best place for her was not with our family, but in a placement for an institution for the feeble-minded, which was the original name of our state school. Currently, the name is the Life Skills Transition Center. We also, in our state, ended up with 2 facilities. But for me, this picture holds a lot of significance. The history of the Grafton State School serves as a symbol of segregation and a loss of dignity that we should never return to as a model for supporting individuals with disabilities. Our state school was established actually in our Constitution in 1903. The development at the time was seen as a best practice model. And in fact, many of the professionals and staff traveled across our country promoting the delivery of service that they were developing at the Grafton State School. But over time, the funding and the philosophy of how to do business did not meet the demand that was placed on them. Stories from Grafton and other state institutions across the country revealed high individual to staff ratios, as well as lack of basic and medical care, education, and life experiences. The population at Grafton hit over 1,500 individuals in the 1960s before a group of families organized under the Association for Retarded Citizens. Now Liz is going to give me the I because I said the R word. And actually sued the state of North Dakota in the early 1980s when I was just starting my career. Today, only roughly 80 individuals live at the Life Skills Transition Center. Many of the buildings have been torn down. Interestingly, the proportion of individuals that are currently at Life Skills Transition Center are youth. They're youth and young adults. And so we're really trying to understand that better. The advocacy groups that worked on this continued to call for closure and provision of services closer to the individuals' homes. So why did the conditions get so bad at these places of care, right? We have good people doing good things. But one of the things that was true is that the people that were being cared for and the people that were being served there did not have a voice. They were invisible to all of us out in the public. They had no ability to bring their voices together as a collective voice. Family members were generally encouraged to disengage. Take your child there and go home and leave. And they were not invited to the table on the care and care-making decisions. The individuals were often seen as conditions versus treated as a whole individual with thoughts, needs, desires, pleasures, etc. And funding and resources and the resource investment did not keep pace with all of the admittances that were happening because there were no resources for anybody to depend on out in the communities. In 1972, journalists were able to shoot footage in one of our units in New York's Willowbrook State School. And many of you have probably heard of Willowbrook. The report drew national attention to an issue that had been invisible to the public. And one of those journalists was Geraldo Rivera. And so I found this letter, which just hit me right in the heart, and I'm going to read it to you. It says, "Dear Geraldo, I saw your newscast tonight, and I was really shocked to see how the kids were in that place. I feel very ashamed and upset about those kids. I'm hoping to help you in any way I can. My name is Ivy, and I'm retarded, and I'm not ashamed of it at all. Good luck, your friend Ivy." This cracked open the seal of invisibility to what was happening in our institutions across the country. And so change started to happen. Over the last week, we lost one of our greatest disability advocates in this country, Judy Heumann. If you haven't read her book, Being Human, you should. And Judy ended up actually, her disability came from having polio. She ended up being our federal director of the Office of Rehabilitation Services and Special Education Programs. She had much to say about access to the world. But I think this is so true, because as I was doing this presentation, I was completely overwhelmed by the amount of time that's passed since I started what I was doing back in 1981 to the fast forward that it's 2023, and really thinking about the evolutionary changes. I mean, the things that have happened for people with disabilities in this country is absolutely phenomenal. But Judy said, change never happens at the pace we think it should. It happens over years of people joining together, strategizing, sharing, and pulling all the levers they possibly can. Gradually, excruciatingly, slowly, things start to happen. And then suddenly, seemingly out of the blue, something will tip. Well, starting in the 1970s, the United States experienced an explosion of technologies in the way of changes to public policy, educational improvements, home and community-based services. Hallmark activities included lawsuits against state governments to move individuals out of large institutions, passage of laws such as the Education of All Handicapped Children, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Disabled people joined by family members and professionals finally found their voice and collectively used it to make a change. I feel like cheering at this point. A great example of this is the story of Katie Beckett. Has anybody heard of Katie Beckett? Have you heard of the Katie Beckett waiver? Heather has. Actually, the story of Katie Beckett and her mom, Julie, they convinced President Reagan, there are pictures right here in the corner, in 1981, to create a waiver to allow Medicaid for services for Katie, who had been in the hospital for 3 years. She was just close to 4 when she actually got to come home. And this advocacy laid the groundwork for the home and community-based Medicaid waivers that exist today. Liz and I have both got to meet Katie and Julie in the big city of Edgeley, North Dakota. Sadly, both of them have passed away. Not only did they create this change, Julie went and Katie went on a long, long journey of continuous trying to make sure that that happened for every other person with a disability who needed those services in this country. Julie was a founding member of the Family Voices of North Dakota, and you know what? She did it. She just kept doing it, even though she was only one person. So a few comments. Heather, I think, is going to touch on how we view disability from different models of perspective, the medical model versus the psychosocial model, and how culturally the collective voice of people with disabilities have forced the needle to for us to really consider disability through that psychosocial model lens, which really recognizes the whole person, not just high tone for somebody who has cerebral palsy, or the cognitive piece for people who have intellectual disabilities, right? But along with this, an element of this shift has been to recognize that with people with disabilities have the right to risk as much as you and I do. And if you can think about, if you're an individual who is constantly with an instructional aide or direct service professional, right? You have such high support needs that somebody needs to be with you often. How does that impact your free will to make decisions about if you want to go right instead of left, if you want to have a cracker instead of a cookie? if you want to scratch your nose instead of get a Kleenex. I think to really live in that world for a long time helps us to kind of understand the impact of that. The mindset that you saw back in that school of Grafton State School, which was really focused on the medical model, was to protect, treat, and cure. But the systems of care today are focusing on person-centered planning, supported decision-making tools, not just automatic guardianships, and having a smaller footprint as professionals in individuals' lives. We get in the way. We can mess things up. People with disabilities can live their lives taking the same kind of risks that we all engage in. And if we don't allow those opportunities, we truly limit learning. Well, so even though I was oblivious to the changes happening around me in 1981, that's you up on the screen, Elizabeth, when I started my career, I was not the same person who was rocking and snuggling this girl in 1999. Special education had evolved to include services for infants, toddlers. More people with disabilities lived in their homes and communities than in our state school. Liz went to her neighborhood school, had a desk, a cubby, and was a valuable member of her class. But even in her early years, there were no options for people with an intellectual disability to go to college. Until a mom started opening that door too, and I've got her picture up there, Stephanie Smithley and her daughter Laura, Stephanie served as the federal director for the Office of Special Education Programs as well, and continues to be a fierce advocate. She began to have conversations at the Department of Education about opening the doors to higher education for persons with intellectual disabilities with the needed supports and structures. So in just a short 18 years, federal education grants made it possible for Elizabeth to go to college. And last spring, we celebrated big time at Minot State University when she got her associate's degree in early childhood. Woo! But now she's working to raise the statistic on employment for people, which is at a dismal 19% for people with intellectual disabilities, by working as an instructional aide for Bismarck Public Schools. One person, one voice. My professional work today as the ED for Designer Genes is to collect those voices, connect them, and raise them up so that we don't forget about how important the investments are in people living with dignity and with choice. And we are going to navigate switching to Donna's story. And it's about I just want to thank them for hanging in there and doing this. And we really ask them to share about how making a decision to open up your lives to somebody with a disability can create such a huge difference. So.
Okay, Donna, we're ready for you.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I should start.
Yes, go ahead and start, Donna.
Okay. My name is Donna Wanzek. This is my daughter, Gail, and we're sorry we couldn't be with you today. We were so looking forward, but the two of us are probably not the best people to be out on these kind of roads and with this kind of weather. So we're coming to you this way. So we're happy to be here. I'm going to have to look at my notes. I've not done this before, so I will look at my notes and hopefully tell you. We're going to tell Gail's story is what we're doing here. Yeah, we will, honey, after bed. We were approached by our priest at the time, Father Kellenberg, and we lived on the farm in Windsor, North Dakota. And my husband and I had 5 kids. They were 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12, approximately, give or take a few months. And he called because it was at the time that the children were coming out of the Grafton State School and they were looking for homes. And he called and wanted to know, he thought we would be a good family to have a new baby. Well, my goodness. We thought about it and we thought, well, we probably wouldn't do this permanently. We've got 5 kids. We lived on a busy farm, lots of cousins and stuff. So, but anyway, finally he kept at us and we finally said, well, bring the baby over. I did not know with anything about the disability that she was having or had, but I certainly knew about babies. I thought I could bring a baby home and take care of a baby for a couple of weeks until they found a permanent home for this baby. Well, here sits my baby. She's 52 years old. Can you say hi to everybody? Hi. Anyway, 2 weeks went by and Father said, no, he really doesn't have anyone in mind, but he's really looking. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon, 6 months, a year, and finally we're all in love with Gail. She was 9 months old when she came to us, and we're all in love with her. And we decided, hey, we don't want anybody to come and take our baby. So it just kind of rode along, and that was it. Social services checked in with us a time or two, but I can honestly say we were pretty much on our own. Before she came, I did go to the library and look up Downs and some stuff, so I thought, well, like I said before, I knew babies. So we took this baby in and yes, we'll show them your baby picture in a minute here, honey. Time went on, and she grew up on the farm, and I don't know, Marvin and I felt the best thing would just to be to put her in the mix and let her go. So she learned to do all the, the farm stuff, gather eggs. She rode horseback. She played with baby lambs. She followed them up in the haymow as they jumped down the hay hole. In the upper haymow, so did Gail, and she broke her leg. Well, my goodness, that those things happen. So we fixed up her leg, and she wasn't very long. She was back out there with them. So then, when it came time for school, Gail went to Jamestown School in the Jamestown school system, and she went to school on the bus. Well, that was a little bit iffy because we worried about her. When kids make fun of her and tease her, and we needn't have worry because, like I said, lots of cousins and there's a lot of Wanzek relatives. And the kids, no one dared pick on Gail. The kids, I know of one boy, I just talked to him the other day. He's 38, 40 years old, but he got into a fight during those years protecting Gail. So she sailed along pretty good. I got to look at my notes here so I know what I want to say next. Like I say, this is all kind of new to me. Anyway, I guess what I'm trying to make is she fit right in. She grew up on a farm. She did all the things, didn't she, Gail? Yes. The farm kids did. This girl has ridden horseback. She's ridden snowmobile. A little story. And I used to be able to leave her, 15, 20 minutes, Marvin working in the yard. So one day I ran in for groceries and Dad said, oh yeah, and she knew he was out there. So at that time, she's embarrassed by this. Can I tell the whiskey story? You go ahead. I come home and there she lays in the middle of the family room floor with a bottle of whiskey. And mind you, it wasn't just sitting there. She could hardly get up. I thought, oh my goodness, what is going on here? I should have hidden that. So what did we do, Gail? Can you tell them what we did?
No,
What did I do?
he made me walking. I fell out twice in a row.
I made her walk and she threw up. So, yeah,
You talk about rat poison?
yeah, we'll talk about that too. So Gail went on this bus to the 12 years of school, and she was over 18. She went a couple of extra years, and then she was out. But she attended graduation and got a diploma, and she's still well known on the streets of Jamestown. Anyway, then what? What next? There's a program in Jamestown called Alpha Opportunities, which I hold in high regard. Oh my goodness! And one of the ladies that was the head of Alpha Opportunities started, because Gail was home now, we had to come up with another plan for her. So we decided that she would attend this Alpha Opportunities, which is what she did. And by doing that, she got to go to Special Olympics, of which her dad became a chaperone on all the buses, and she excelled in bowling and running and all sorts of stuff.
Now had heat stroke.
Yeah, she had a heat stroke at one of them. Yes, but anyway, she. What is the only thing you do now for Special Olympics?
It's only bocce and bowling.
Bocce and bowling, she does.
Yes.
I guess, what else do I want to say here? I mean, what started out as a worry thing, will this work? Will we be able to take care of Gail? Our idea, I think, was just to put her in the mix of kids, not that we weren't aware of her disability, but not to stress on it, not to stress it to her. She could do what she could do, and what she couldn't do, we all kind of covered. And here she is, 52 years old. So I think, I'm looking here, I think the thing to do is not to hold people with disabilities back. Expect that they can do things until they prove that they can't. And then there are other things to do and other ways to do things. That's the way Gail was raised. To this day, I will tell you that I am so glad Gail is in our family, because I lost my husband 2 years ago, and she lives on her own in an apartment in Jamestown, North Dakota, and I used to call her every night, either her or her dad, to find out how she was doing, and say your prayers and make sure your doors are locked. Guess who's getting the calls nowadays? With Dad gone, I am every night, 9:30, she calls me, tells me not to go out, it's snowing, it's storming, and be sure and lock the doors and say my prayers. She's still under the Alpha Opportunities, so she gets to go to Special Olympics and do all those things. What else did I want to? I think the thing is not to label people by their disability. We kind of ignored the whole thing, and what she could do, and what she couldn't. So I guess that's my big lesson I would want to get out there.
Sometimes rat poison.
Oh, we don't need to tell them you ate rat poison one time, honey.
Come on, that's up in younger years.
Okay, do you want to say anything to anybody?
Last to be Wanzek, because I was adopted with Bison, Fargo, because I cherish my mother, my Wanzek side. I love them guys too much.
I'm gonna cry. She's getting real emotional as we're talking about this. She just said she's blessed to be a Wanzek, and she loves her family, and she cherishes her mother. And Gail, we can't forget this.
It's me.
Let's get it right up there.
Right here.
Picture of her as a baby. Why this picture is cut up into this shape, I have no idea. She did it.
I know.
Okay, like I said, I am so blessed to have this girl. The whole family just loves her. She knows people. She works at the college in the lunchroom. She works at the library, wherever, through Alpha Opportunity, wherever she can.
I worked at college 20 years.
20 years she worked at the college. I think that's about it, unless someone would like to ask a question. I don't know.
Well, thank you, ladies. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And if we have just a few other things, Roxane and I have a few other things to say. Your story was incredible, and we are very blessed that you were able to share it with us. So if you want to just mute that microphone again, and then feel free to stay on and listen, and we'll wrap things up here.
It sounds good. Thank you for having us. Click on this little thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. I'm just going to wrap things up a little bit here today, just talk. Well, let me do this first. Let me see if I can get these slides back up. Oh, look at that. There we go. All right. So I think something that we've heard today is really emulated within this quote. If we can change the beginning of the story, we can change the whole story. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, for all of you that are present today, listening with a curious mind and an open heart, you have made the first step in being an advocate for inclusion practices for individuals with disabilities. And now we want to share with you some opportunities to better understand, first of all, the barriers to inclusion, which you've heard a little bit about today already, and then focus on the opportunities that each of you have to make a difference now and in the future to promote inclusion of individuals with disabilities. It starts with a mindset and some key frames of reference. First, embrace the uniqueness of each individual human. Second, appreciate the dignity of the human person. Third, celebrate the possibilities. Fourth, understand that we are all truly more alike than different. And 5, but probably the most important, have a desire to make a difference. People with disabilities do experience significant disadvantages when it comes to healthcare, employment, education, when compared to people without disabilities. One consideration as we look forward from barriers to opportunities, as Roxane alluded to earlier, is this concept of considering the frame of reference for disability. So we have 2 models, the medical and the psychosocial model of disability. Disability has historically been framed by the medical model, in which disability belonged to the individual, and disability was seen as something that needed to be fixed or cured. In fact, a recent survey done at Harvard University said that most physicians associate disability with worse quality of life, a finding, of course, that you can imagine may contribute to care disparities. Additionally, 40% of the physicians surveyed reported feeling very confident about their ability, only 40%, I should say, reported feeling confident about their ability to provide the same quality of care to patients with disabilities as their other patients received. See, maybe I'm missing a slide. There's supposed to be, oh, this one, opportunity. With a traditional medical model frame of reference, many believed that all things related to disability should be addressed by those that work in medicine or health care. What a limited pool of individuals and frames of references this leaves us. Don't get me wrong, those of us, myself included, that are healthcare providers do have an essential role in promoting disability inclusion, but so do we all. Each and every one of us that represents all the schools at the University of Mary has an opportunity through your vocation to advance advocacy efforts that provide opportunities for individuals with intellectual disabilities to live lives that value their inherent dignity as humans. First of all, we all must see a person with a disability first as a person to encounter and not a problem to be fixed. And then I've got some ideas for you, for each of you in the audience representing a different school. We'll start with the St. Gianna School of Health Sciences. As a nurse, maybe you have the opportunity to create public health initiatives for access to healthcare for adults with disabilities. As a physical therapist, maybe you can partner with individuals to maximize mobility in the community, possibly riding a bike so that individuals who aren't able to drive can still engage with their peers and get to and from work if they don't. As an occupational therapist, create meaningful work opportunities for individuals with intellectual disabilities. In the School of Behavioral Sciences and Education, as a social worker, advocate for independent living with supports and programs that don't penalize you for independent living or work. As an educator, create inclusive education opportunities like the peer-to-peer program we have here in the Bismarck Public Schools, or promote and sustain an inclusive sports program. In the Gary Tharaldson School of Business, as a business owner, see the possibilities for individuals of all abilities to work through creative mentoring partnerships that maximize the abilities of all to contribute to society and to address a workforce shortage. In the School of Engineering, engineers develop technologies such as driverless cars, communication devices that don't require a voice to speak, technologies that can support an individual with intellectual disabilities to operate a computer or a cash register in non-traditional ways, and universal home safety features as well. And in the School of Arts and Sciences, recognize the need to accommodate religious education classes and sacramental preparation at local parishes to be inclusive of all individuals. Through research, discover things like how to prevent Alzheimer's in individuals with Down syndrome. And advocate the power of music for communication, building relationships, and the therapeutic process. We don't have time for this today, but if you're interested, Google You Mary, Go Baby Go, and you'll see a partnership between physical therapy students and engineering students that created mobility options for people, for little or children that were unable to walk. So finally, your role, advocacy. Advocacy is any action that speaks in favor of, recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends, or pleads on behalf of others. And I wrote here, we are called to do more even when we don't like it. So I hope today you'll leave here with an answer to this question. What possibilities do you see? I hope that you all will think differently about including with individuals with disabilities in our community. Your challenge, or our challenge for you, is to now go out and truly make a difference. We all are created in the same image. And finally, therefore, welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you for the glory of God. And a plug for World Down Syndrome Day, March 21st, 321, trisomy 21. One way to do a simple advocacy effort is to celebrate the day by wearing a pair of mismatched socks. And Rock Your Socks is a symbol of what the allele of the trisomy 21 gene actually looks like. And so wear funky socks on 321, and that's the first step to advocacy for supporting individuals with disabilities. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us.